This is a video on saved watch list feature in the SP500 Analyzer app. It's assumed that the viewer has watched the introduction video and the watch list video before viewing this video. As a reminder, when you first open the SP500 Analyzer app, you're viewing over here in the watch list area the sample watch list by default. You can modify this as much as you want by, let's say you want to remove these specific tickers. You want to add your own tickers, let's say Procter & Gamble and let's say Netflix. And I can come over here and do a refresh. And this is covered in those previous videos, but just briefly going through that. I can refresh the price information, and then if I wanted to, I can add some, as it was mentioned in the previous videos, how the default shares are calculated. I can go ahead and enter, since this Netflix is not part of the S&P 500, have to enter in my own number of shares, but I can do that here, enter in 20 shares. And then there's other information here like beta and such that's not available for Netflix, but I can keep adding that information, keep adding more tickers and things like that. Save off spreadsheet, reopen the spreadsheet, and just operate that way. Now, the problem with doing it that way is that anytime if you were to come back out here and reselect sample, it's going to go off to the SavedList worksheet, pull the information from the original sample watch list and bring it back into this area. So it'll overwrite any changes if you ever, again, were to reselect sample. So that's really not the preferred way of creating your own custom watch list. Another approach would be to start off instead of with the sample watch list, to start off with none. Since this video was originally recorded, a pop-up message now displays when none or blank watch list is selected. The pop-up message suggests before proceeding that should type in a watch list name in cell U19, because as shown in the pop-up, you cannot save a watch list that is named none or blank. That way, if you decide later on to save the watch list, you have a name to save it under. Notice that once none is selected, the watch list area is cleared out. Then allows you to come in here at any one of the rows and let's say type in the following: Procter & Gamble, General Motors, and Splunk. And I can come over here and refresh the price data, and like we saw when we added additional tickers to the sample watch list, there is some information that's not available, particularly for Splunk, which is not an S&P 500 stock. So I could enter in the amount of shares here, and I could even replace the number of default shares that were calculated for the two stocks that are part of the S&P 500, enter the beta, and so on, and then get roll up for the overall portfolio once all that information is available. I'll go ahead and do the beta. I would say for Splunk is something like 1.6, and you get the idea. Now we see the roll up here for the beta. But just like with the sample watch list, when we use none, as long as you save off the spreadsheet, come back in and just have this one watch list that you're gonna keep track of, this works. But as soon as I come up and select none again, it'll clear out. It literally means none. It clears out the area, and you're left with none. So you've lost everything that you've been maintaining up to that point. Now, again, this could suffice for some people, but really the better approach is to unhide, and I've already got it unhidden here, the save list, and just go in here and do explicit entries, build out your new watch list here in the saved list area. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and call this the my list, and the stocks we had going were Procter & Gamble, and I'm just going to copy this down 2 more times: Procter & Gamble, General Motors, and Splunk. Now I know that Procter & Gamble and General Motors are part of the S&P 500, so I will have default shares. But usually when I'm creating my own watch list like this, I have very specific shares that I'm going to go forward with. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in 20 shares. Let's say 25 shares and 10 shares. Now the beta will automatically be brought in for the S&P 500 members of this watch list. It's the Splunk, which is not member, that I'm going to go ahead and enter in the beta here. 1.6 PE ratio, let's say it's something like 30, and maybe the dividend yield, there's no dividends being paid, and the expected investment return that comes from the Polaris website. So I went to the Polaris website, typed in Splunk, and I saw the expected return of something like 15%. Now the full company name, I have to type that in here, Splunk. The sector, it's really best to go and get the exact sector name for Splunk, but I'm going to assume that it's something like technology and industry, maybe computers or something. So that gets us started. Now if I come back over here to the S&P 500 now, and I do the drop down, I will now see my list, watch list, has been added. Now when I select it, it'll bring in off the saved list those three stocks. You notice here that the shares are already filled in. I have the beta being calculated for the S&P 500 members of the portfolio, and then the explicit value I entered in, and then the same thing for the PE and the expected return. And then if I scroll to the right, I'd see the other information, full company name, sector, industry. Well, I want to point your attention to PE is a price earnings multiple. Therefore, that value is contingent upon the current price. Yield is the dividend divided by the current price. And then even the expected return could change over time. But all three, definitely these two, as the price changes, it'll change. But because you've made a specific entry in the save list area for those values, they're not automatically calculated, so they have to be explicitly provided in the save list. So you want to kind of monitor that, and if the price changes drastically, or in the case of the PE, the earnings change, or in the case of the dividend yield, the dividend changes drastically. And in the case of the expected investment return, if Polaris has quite a different return, you would want to come back out here to your save list and update that information here. Now, while we're looking here at the save list worksheet, I want to point out that the order in which you see these watch list items appear in the SP 500 worksheet, namely this order list here, sample model, model, and my list, is dictated by the order of which they're entered into the save list worksheet. You can change the order by simply moving around the items. You don't have to move all of them, but it is preferable that all that relate to the same watch list, you keep them together just for clarity. But if I move at least one of them up, and then now if I go back here to the S&P 500 and look at the order of my list, I see sample my list in model, as opposed to what I had before, which is sample model in my list. But that new order is just from one of the, working from the top, it found sampled, and the next unique watch list item it found was my list. So it got listed second, and then model was the third one to be found. If you wanted to delete a watch list, first of all, I'm going to move this back so that they're all together. It's just easier to do it that way. You would just simply highlight the rows that make up the watch list, and then just delete the rows. Now, editing the save list worksheet directly is okay when occasionally needing to create or modify a saved watch list. But if you plan on routinely creating and more importantly routinely modifying values associated with your save list, it's best that you activate what's called the Watchlist Save Delete feature and use that to do most of your editing of Watchlist directly from the SP 500 worksheet and not having to do it here in the saved list. So let's talk about go through what we're talking about here. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and delete these 3 rows here, so we don't have a my list in our save list. And then go out to the manage, and here in cell H3 there is a drop. This is the item here where you would activate it by turning that on. And now when we go back to the S&P 500 worksheet, notice here in cell U17 there's now a gray, the cell is gray, and any gray background cell means there's input expected in that cell or available in that cell. Well, you notice here that even though I deleted my list, we didn't do anything here to the S&P 500 worksheet. So it's still showing that we're displaying the last instance before I deleted of my list. We haven't replaced it with any new list. And so let's say that, I've maybe a little different scenario. I've ended up typing these in, and I've actually typed in cell U21 name of a watch list that I want called my list. Now I just simply want to save it off. Well, now that that feature has been activated, you just come up here to this cell and select save, and it'll go out to cell U19 and verify the name of the watch list that you want to save this to. Now optionally you can enter a different name. If you enter a pre-existing watch list name, it will be overwritten, so be careful. Next you just hit OK, and then it comes back here and says that it's been saved off. So now we go look at the save list, and you notice here that they're back again. Well, we didn't have to come here into the save list worksheet to add that. It was added through this feature. So now I can come out here and change this to 20, let's say, instead of 10, and now just come up here and just simply save it off. And when it's done saving, we'll go see that in the save list that now it's got 20 sitting there for the number of shares. So it's just a convenient way when you're doing more regular editing of your watch list, not to have to go out to the save list and do it there. You can just do it in one place. Now to complete that, there's also a delete ability here, so you don't have to go out to the save list to even do a delete. Now we'll come back and make sure that you're wanting to delete the correct list. I'm going to go ahead and put no, that I don't, and so I'll just cancel that. Now you can do most of your editing here, but let's say that for some reason you wanted to enter in a new ticker, let's say Netflix or something like that, and for visual effect you really wanted to just keep a blank row in between Splunk and Netflix. Well, now when I go off and save this, and now I'm going to not only save it, but now I'm going to come back here and I'm going to bring it back in, so you can see my list. And when you see when it brings it back in, that you're not going to preserve that blank row in between Splunk and Netflix. And so things like that, you're just going to have to go out to the save list, and then you can see here you can just simply insert a row explicitly here in and then use my list and just have it be a blank row. Now when you come back out here and select my list again, you're going to get the blank row back. So trade-off is that you can't do all the things that you did when you were directly editing the saved list, but you can do most of the things. And then there's just a few things like that where you want to add a blank row that you would need to go into the save list itself to do that kind of thing. Another kind of obscure thing that maybe rarely would be required is you might want to list in your watch list the same ticker more than one time. Again, this is a very rare situation. And let's say, for example, for some reason I wanted to list Splunk again and a different number of shares. Again, I'm not sure why we'd want to do that, but let's say the 10 shares, but a total of 30 shares in the portfolio. Well, that just doesn't work with this feature because this save delete feature assumes only a single instance of unique stocks in the watch list. So if you had that kind of need, you'd have to do that by doing it explicitly over here in the save list worksheet. Okay, well, this has been a video on the saved watch list feature in the SP500 Analyzer app. Well, thanks for watching.